Blessed Man Meditations is where we provide answers to the intellectual side of Christianity and equip Christians to provide a defense for the hope that is in them according to 1 Peter 3:15. Today on Blessed Man Meditations, we continue going through Person of Interest, Why Jesus Still Matters in a World That Rejects the Bible, written by J. Warner Wallace, America's foremost cold case detective. Wallace is a Dateline-featured cold case homicide detective, popular national speaker, and best-selling author. Relying on over 2 decades of investigative experience, Wallace provides the tools needed to investigate the claims of Christianity and make a convincing case for the truth of the Christian worldview. This time, we're doing Chapter 5, In the Fullness of Time, Jesus Arrives. History reveals that God is frequently in people's minds because they've imagined him in all sorts of mythological forms. Many ancient deities took on characteristics that Jesus of Nazareth possessed. By placing the major mythologies in a timeline, including the dates people started and stopped worshiping these mythologies, we find something interesting. Osiris begins to be worshipped around 3300 BCE, and worship of Osiris ends around 250 CE. With the picture on the bottom there, you can see it drawn out. Each of the mythologies pictured below shared a number of similarities with Jesus: Osiris, Tammuz, Marduk, Shangdi, Attis, Indra, Aker, Adonis, Jiu, Zoroaster, Dionysius, Heracles, Krishna, Dalmaxus, Buddha, Serapis, and Mithras. Each of these share a number of similarities with Jesus. It's not likely that Jesus was copied from these mythologies because the similarities are too broad. Similarities are the kind of thing one would expect to find coming from people who were thinking about God's nature. So people are going to think about a God figure, and they're going to imagine what type of attributes would this God figure have, and they're going to assign these attributes to this God figure. And they made these false gods with these names, and they assigned attributes to these false gods. It stands to reason that humans would recognize true things about God over time, and God would eventually meet people's expectations of what he would be like. Right. So people are coming up with these attributes of these false gods, and then eventually Jesus comes and he possesses all of these attributes that these false gods had, that people gave to these false gods. If the true God wanted to interact with humans by meeting the divine expectations of the greatest number of people possible, he would arrive when all these expectations are logical. So, if God really wanted to reveal himself to me, he would do so in a way that would make it possible for the greatest number of people to discover who he really is. Based on that rationale, if God would have appeared between 350 BCE and 250 CE, 600-year window, all the religious groups that worship the gods listed on the previous slide would have still been active. Those people would have had similar expectations about God as well. So, for 600 years, between 350 BCE and 250 CE, people would have shared common expectations about God. Since the Roman Empire eventually conquered the entire region by about 146 BCE, they were able to adopt the Etruscan alphabet and build an amazing system of roads that enabled travel throughout the region. When Augustus came into power, the Romans created a postal service system called the Persis Publicus and provided a continuous common government until the fall of the empire centuries later. Augustus also initiated peace in the region, called the Pax Romana, that lasted for over 200 years. All these things are working together to make for the arrival of the Messiah, that would facilitate the Messiah's arrival. So there's now an area of overlap that takes advantage of humanity's common expectations of God and also leverages the opportunity that the Roman Empire provided to spread the news of God's arrival. Even though that red area is still over 200 years long, remember that the Jewish prophets predicted the coming of a person of interest, the Messiah, and one of the prophets provided a range of dates. Daniel said the Messiah would come after an edict to rebuild Jerusalem and before the destruction of the temple. Notice. So there's this large range of time from 444 BCE to 70 CE. It covers the range discussed in the previous chapter that Daniel identified as the time between the edict to rebuild Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple, between 444 BCE and 70 CE. So notice how all the time spans from the spiritual, cultural, and prophetic fuses overlap. This tells us that something was likely to happen between 29 BCE and 70 CE. There's the red zone, which is something was likely. That's an extremely narrow window of time for some significant historical event. 100 years. It was this narrow window of time that our calendar changed forever. It was in this narrow window of time, that 100-year, 99-year window of time, our calendar changed forever. It was in this narrow window of time that BCE turned into CE. So what happened during this tiny red zone? Was it a political event? Was it a governmental edict? Was it an act of war? Was it a national tragedy or catastrophe? Could it be that the explosive appearance of a single person of interest has forever disrupted our human calendar? The three-stranded fuse that burned toward the common era seemed to make Jesus' arrival inevitable. He met our human expectations, Jewish predictions, and arrived at precisely the right time in history of the Roman Empire to be shared with the entire known world. The Apostle Paul, who wrote most of the New Testament, wrote, "When the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, so that we might receive the adoption as sons." Did Paul mean that God sent Jesus at just the right moment in history? The few certainly seem to agree. But every explosion, whether a criminal act or an important historical event, has both a fuse and some fallout, and there's still more to investigate. If Jesus truly mattered, the fallout of history would be cluttered with evidence. Find out next time the dissemination fall. That was a real brief one. So thank you for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It's the rest of your